Well, like I said, I'm really happy to be able to make a presentation to the Quad Cities wood turners. I've been a woodworker most of my life. I'm fourth generation. My son is fifth generation. As you can tell by my T-shirt, we've been in business for quite a while. Tyler started when he was about 8 years old, wood turning. So I'm glad to see that we have a couple of young wood turners here tonight. It's one of the safest activities you can partake in. I mean, sure, you hear the tragic stories occasionally, but it's very, very rare. But I've always been attracted to wood. It's always offered lots of possibilities. It's always been something that I felt was very malleable, very much like clay. You can do almost anything with it. The properties are endless. We have our own sawmill. And it's a bandsaw sawmill, and we have a 20-acre woodlot. I bought this in 1986. I studied art for 8 years in college. I knew I wasn't going to be rich, and so I wanted to have an endless resource of material, and that's what it's done. It's given me all the wood that I could ever want. We have about 16 species in our property, and every one has a different quality to it. I could live 3 lifetimes and not know all there is to know about the properties of wood. There's always a new and exciting experience that you'll have every day you go into the shop. So studying art, I had no interest in teaching. I taught 3 years, found that that just was too tough of a job. I felt I wanted to be productive. So I forged ahead, and I realized that if you can combine a function, a utility, with the craft, with the creative part, it makes it a lot more promising for making a future, making a marketing future for yourself. And so for the last 50 years, I've been building bars and altars. This is one of the bars that I produced. They're all for private homes. I've only done one commercial bar. Tonight, I'd like to show you one of the processes. All I've ever done is spindle turning. And so when you're putting a spindle on the face of a structure, you need it to be a flat surface. And so how do you turn a spindle or a round turned object and then cut it in half? I've learned that there's a simpler way than by trying to bandsaw a round object. And I'd like to be able to demonstrate that to you tonight as to how I can do that. We don't do that I've done 35 of these. I'm not doing any more. I've joined Tyler in doing the shows, and he's got his items. He does a lot of pepper mills and candle holders. He's doing a great number of table lamps. It's really quite amazing when you think about it, what kind of functional items you can make with the spindle. I'm doing walking sticks. Very colorful walking sticks. I'm doing coat trees. One of the biggest sellers for me is hall trees. They're in 2 sections. They have hooks at the top and in the middle, and so it makes it multifunctional. It allows for children to have no excuse for hanging things up. We do the legs then out of a solid wood, just a stained wood, but everything else has that colored element that you may have seen Tyler demonstrate tonight. It introduces a very whimsical and joyful element, doing the brighter colors. When we're at shows, people consistently walk past our booth or come into our booth, and they have just big smiles on their face. So it really adds a great touch of accent color to any home, and adds a different amount of enjoyment to either the hallway or the bedroom or bathroom or whatever, offices. So just one more picture. I wanted to show this as a story that they did of Tyler in our local newspaper when he was 12 years old. He actually needed a stool to stand on to be able to reach the lace. So like I said, he was 8 years old. At 10 years old, he was playing around with crayons, actually misbehaving, and he stumbled upon a really unique process. And it's fortified him at 26 now through to a full-time professional career. the things that I want to show you what we do tonight. This is similar to what we do with coat trees, only we have a two-level. People would come to our booth and they would exclaim how beautiful that coat tree is, but we just don't have room. Do you have something that we can put on a wall? And so really this is the answer to that question. And as you can see, this is an example of how you can do the turning. And by breaking it in half, it's actually broken in half, you can have two for the price of one. We do in three sections. There's this main body that has to have the divider, have the corners cut off so that we have space for the hooks. And then we add a plate and then a finial to the top and the bottom just to extend that colorful look. And it's just a simple hanging process. We do this element with the hanger and the command strip down below so it doesn't swing, but we've changed now to believing that people can actually put a screw in a wall. So we pre-drill a hole at the top and the bottom, and all they need to do is find a stud, and then we provide the mushroom caps so that they can cover up the hole. But this is the demonstration that I want to show you tonight. We start with a block. You could actually go to your lumber yard and get two equal size pieces. It just needs to be as wide as it is thick. We take a 4.5 by 4.5 and saw them in half so that with our sawmill we do a lot of cutting of aspen. It's an inexpensive wood. We buy the truckload, and then we cut it all into 4.5 by 4.5 stock. We've probably got about 3 or 4 or 5 years worth of stock currently in our barns, in our sheds. But you glue them together. There's a unique process to glue them together. I'll show you how to do that. Once they're glued together, then this is what we do with the corners. We cut the corners off so that they can accept those hooks. I'll set that up there so you can see it. The standard method for putting up a coat tree typically is horizontally. We could do that too, but it's harder to display it in our showroom. It's more involved for the person when they got to hang it to find two spots. And if you're doing that, you only can do one hook on each flat because this would be awkward if you had hooks on these diagonals. By putting them on a diagonal, you're just able to get more hooks on it. And the style of hook is endless. There's no end as far as whatever taste you have. You can go with either brushed chrome, you can go with black, you can go with any design that you like. They're actually pretty inexpensive. Menards is where I get most of my hooks. So the glue up process is a little funky. It may sound a little bit strange to you, but what we're doing is we open the piece up, we apply a liberal amount of wood glue, generally alphatic resin. We like the Type Bond 1 or 2. Type Bond 3 is very good as well. And the thing that separates them is after putting the glue on the two surfaces, then we put a piece of newspaper down, which glues to both surfaces of the boards, and it allows for a space that will, when you pry them apart, it'll separate that single piece of newspaper into two pieces, and it allows it to break evenly. You could make a jig and run it through your band saw or your table saw. You've got the tear out on the bottom. I've never seen anybody able to do it really straightly. So this really creates a very simple, easy, and effective way of making it so that it's an easy separation. So the glue, I don't know if you can see this from the photograph if I need to move anything out of the way. I'm putting a liberal amount on both surfaces. And I've done 35 bars. Every one has had some curvatures to them. In order to curve a piece of wood, I've always used laminate sections, usually a 3/8, a quarter to 3/8 to a ½ inch, depending on how severe the curve is. I've never ever had to spread it out. I've always allowed the wood to spread it out itself, and I've never had a void. I know a lot of people like to use the silicone brushes, but I've seen that if you apply a liberal enough amount, it's all going to spread out on its own very evenly after the pressure and the clamps have been applied. So this is just a regular standard piece of newspaper. I apply it to one face, I press, remove excess, let it overhang on the sides. Take the other piece and just simply slip it onto the top of it. I like to do a friction fit by moving it back and forth a little bit. That just creates that suction that pulls it down. And then just align it properly. Give it a little more pressure. And then I put 6 clamps on. The trick to clamping is to not put them down too tightly at first. Get them all evenly tightened all the way around. It helps to have a block under it like I have here. Kind of go opposite one another to get the clamps on to even the pressure all over the entire board. Always keep checking to see if your alignment is correct. If it's not correct, you could kind of move the clamp a little bit yet. I can see on this side I'm getting some glue squeeze out. And then I just continue adding more and more clamps. Try to do them on the very ends.
Do you run that through a planer? Do you worry about having that surface completely flat?
No, in fact, I'll run it through the table saw. It's a 4½ inch piece. I'll set my blade at 2 3/8 inches. I'll run it through once, I'll flip it over and run it again. And even though it may have been offset, because a lot of times these chunks are not square, and so when you're flipping it, you're getting one angle one way and one angle the other way, so there could be a 1/16 off. It just creates kind of a male-female connection, and so they still get plenty of connection. I've never had, well, I shouldn't say I never. There are occasions when this will come apart. If it's not been clamped properly, if there's been something that occurred. But the thing about these chunks, when they're turning, you've got the rest in front of you. If it's going to come apart, you usually get a sign because it'll start wobbling, and then it'll fly away from you typically. I've done a couple hundred of them. I would say 10-15% of the time they're going to come apart. The nice thing about when they come apart, even if you're turning it, that's when you put it together, it's even better that their surfaces are, because you'll have more glue surface that will be able to be connected, and the next time around they're going to be even tighter. So now I've got all 6 clamps on. I like to put 2 on the end and 2 in the middle. If it's a longer piece, then you want to use 6 or 8. But I've got good squeeze out on this side. The squeeze out is looking pretty good here. You can smear it everywhere that you like. It's not going to matter because it's all going to get cut away. When I see it dripping like that, I just pull up on it and try to smear it out evenly. You want to leave it overnight. Don't try to go back at it in a couple of hours. I know wood will set up in an hour, they say, and it's probably going to be very tight and good for some projects. But for something like this, I want to leave it at least 12 to 24 hours. A full day is the ideal. I've done them where I've come in the next day, turned them. may come apart. I'll see wet wood still in there, and it's just showed me that I should have waited a little longer. You know, if there's not any risk involved in anything, what fun is it? So, but it's minimal. It's calculated, and so far it's worked out. Anyway, so that's the glue up. That's going to be a very good piece. That when it's ready, I remove the clamps. I run it through the table saw to create that six-sided, 1, 2, 3, 8 sides. And that's what I usually do with any turning that I make. These are severe because I want to have a large, flat surface to be able to screw that hook to. And typically, if I'm trying to maximize the thickness, then I'll just take the minimum right angle off of that corner. All right, so
when you cut that, do you sand that before you start putting finish on it, or is that smooth enough?
Right. Then I've got these elements here that I have to deal with after it's turned. After this is turned, I'll sand that to 150. We'll never go beyond 150, only because we like to have some tooth for that color to be able to be absorbed by. If we go to 320 or 400 or some severe grit, that color is not going to be absorbed or take on as well as we'd like. So we go to 150 on that. This, I just go to the horizontal sander, and I'll hit all 4 sides of this face, get that raw. This is the rough sawn. This is the rough sawn edge. I'll take that to the horizontal belt sander, and that's about 80 grit. And then I use a liquid stain for that. I like to use either an alcohol-based or a water-based stain, and I just do it while it's turning in the lathe to give it the color. And I go with various natural tones for these sections. Yeah?
Do you have any kind of jig? Do you have any kind of a jig for your table saw to prevent the piece from turning or kicking back?
No, because it's tight against the fence. I'll set the blade at 45 degrees. I'll set it close enough to the blade so that I can take off as much as I need to on the corners. And I always flip it. When I do 2 sides, I do a 180 degree turn, and then I flip it and do the same 180 degree turn, so that I get an equal amount removed from each of the corners. It helps during the measuring of the center, and it's a little more accurate that way. But no jig is ever required when you're turning when it's tight against that fence. We use the scraps then for kindling. Okay, I'll get this out of the way. I've been heating with wood my entire life in the shop. I have a propane furnace, but I think I use that maybe 5% of the time. All right, so once that's ready to go, I've cut my corners off and find my centers. We have about 6 or 7 lathes in the shop. One sanding, coloring, turning, bowls, a couple of Lagunas, mostly grizzly. One we keep outside under a lean-to for sanding with a fan any time of the year, winter, summer, whatever. I use a roughing gouge. Tyler just bought me for my birthday, he bought a skew chisel. I've never used a skew chisel in my life.
You got a good instructor, right?
And he's one of the best instructors. within 10 minutes, he had me convinced I should be using a skew. And I'm not ready to. I mean, I'm happy to do a skew on a roundover. But I said, how do you do the coves? That's a little more challenging. And that's where the roughing chisel comes in handy. But I'll continue to persist. You know, it's hard to teach an old dog, but I'm open to variety. The chisel I'm most in favor of or in love, and I don't even know where I got it. It's a spindle gouge, a low angle, but it's wide. It's very similar to a skew, but I really gotten really dependent upon it. Once I've roughed it out, this is what I finish everything with. And I'd love to hear anybody's advice on where you can get custom tools made, because I can't find it in any catalog. Tyler and I have both been looking. But I start 3 inches in. I put a mark 3 inches in from both ends. And that's what my 2 flats will be. I give them a good mark so I can see them. And then I simply use a parting tool to go down another 1/2 inch or something. Sorry. I got used to using one of the smocks. I don't want to get my black shirt all. Marlene will have a word or two with me later tonight if I get that full of sawdust. So, but smocks are great. You know, those dusts can go in everywhere down your shirt, and so really I recommend a smock. I don't know what that is, maybe 800 or 900 RPM. Go in 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch. Turn the lathe off before you move your rest like I just did. You know, when you're doing production turning, you really skip on some of the basics, and I don't recommend it, but you know, sometimes you just get lazy. And
You should have came to some of the demos that I've never seen somebody that can turn as well as he does with his head, like looking at people and still
yeah,
doing what he's
well, he's got a TV in front of his lathe, and he's watching these videos while he's turning. You know, I mean, you ought to see his shop. And,
I tell him when he turns, I'm going to get some chairs, popcorn machine, and some tickets.
he's engrossing. I watch him, and I think, my goodness, where do you get that? So I start with the center. Usually I've got a little bit wider tool rest, but I would start with the center. I don't wear a shield. I like to use my hand to block it. That again is not recommended. My fingers are blocking it from splashing in my face. I do it both back and forth. All right, I've got it circular or in a what's that word? Cylinder. I've got it in a cylinder. And then I like to do the the ends. The ends have to taper into it, and then they have to taper out of it. As you can see here, I need to be able to put that plate on, so it has to have that tapered end so it hasn't got that sharp edge. A little too fast. I want to do some serious gradations. I want to have not as thin as possible, but I want to keep the maximum thickness just because I hate to waste wood. I want to maximize whatever that thickness is that I've got. So I want a large area, then I want to have multiple thinner areas. And when you're spindle turning, it's really all just nothing but beads and coves. You're just making a series of beads and coves and trying to make it as unique or as interesting as you possibly can. And the only way you can do that is just practicing and by experience. And with the roughing gouge, I'm just getting the basic shapes. So as you can see here, I've got my, I lost my microphone. I've got my flats. I can increase the size of that back at a horizontal sander by going deeper into it if I like. These are just about correct for what I need. And next I'll just go over to the other side. Could use a little wax. It's working. So far it looks pretty stable. I don't see any looseness occurring. If I should catch, that's when you're going to have a problem. And I try to think of it in terms of the vertical, so I want to see a top and a bottom. So typically I'll go from a little bit smaller top to a wider base. So that's my faces. I've got both of my faces ready. Now I want to shape the interior so that it has an interesting look to it. Generally I'll go thin at the top and probably thin at the bottom. Just back and forth, downhill each time, down grain, trying to avoid the catches. And I really like balls. Round shapes are really interesting, at least when you're making them. So that's my general rough shape. That's when I come in with my fine tuner. And I like to start at the top, just out of habit. It gives it a more refined surface and it gives me a controlled shape. Making precise definition of the shape and as Tyler was saying, the properties of art being line, shape, texture, color. These lines are what we're really wanting to use as part of the formal artistic merit. I like to go with a couple of beads. If you get too repetitive, it just gets, not that that's boring, but if you get too repetitive, it's too predictable. So you go with a couple of beads and then do a sweeping cove. Always end your cove with another defined line. And then I want to go in with another bead. I'll create a little bit more half moon shape, just to break away from doing the smaller bead, and then define that. Go with another bead, another bead, And then we've got that ball shape. This piece here is not that interesting. I don't want to make a bead out of it, but I'll try to slip another cove in there. A little bit narrower cove. And then refine that ball a little better. And then at that juncture, do another bead. Those beads are really important for the coloring process because they allow you to add a little bit of an accent. You'll have your predominant colors, green, blue, whatever, and then you throw in a purple or some other contrasting element that just really allows that whole thing to be a little more exciting. And that's what Tyler and I have been doing with all of these pieces. Double bead at the end, then I like to do a good sweep where this whole thing will get stained. It'll get that dark natural stain. I could come back out here and I might want to do a colored bead here. You see, in order to do the coloring that we're doing with the oil pastels, we can't do it on a flat. It has to be turned. We can't just scribble it on there. It requires that friction. It goes on very opaque, very pasty, very thick. By taking that rag and wiping it, that's what creates the friction, and it really makes it transparent, allows it to melt into the wood. And so by doing it out here or somewhere, that gives us the opportunity. Even on these guys here on the ends, I could still, and I still do color that, but I typically like to have it match close to what the natural stain color is. Okay, that's as close as I need for sanding. We'll get 80 grit. We'll take it outside to our sanding lathe. That'll be 80 grit, 150. And then we use we started off using a carpenter's pencil. That big, thick, flat carpenter's pencil would make our lines for us. And that works really good. But I do what many of you have already done yourself. We like to use a copper wire. And what it does for us, for me, it creates a very distinct, bold line. And it also burns kind of a crevice, a cove into the wood. It really helps us be able to color it a little more precisely without bleeding into another area, particularly when it's a liquid. That liquid really is difficult to control from bleeding into the next area. I won't do many of these, but I'll just show you the example of it gets so burned that you'll have a cloud of smoke. That's why you certainly want to be doing it outside with a fan directing the wind away from you. But you can see how bold and dark that line is. And I'll go through, this is a number 10 wire. I like them thick. This will break after I've done 20 or 30 of those, and then I just get another piece of wire. I went to Menards and priced electrical wire. It's unbelievable. So I go to the junkyard now and get whatever scraps I can get. So that's the process by which I get to where I got to sand, color, and then these are what have already been colored. I brought several of them with me. We do both 2-hook and 3-hook. So the 3-hook is just a little more aggressive in function, allowing for the 2 smaller hooks in the top and the middle. I'm sorry, on the bottom and the middle, and then the top you'll go with a little more flurry with some other style. But I'll demonstrate to you.
On that one up there that you just had, the 3-hook one, is there a reason why you don't sand that before you finish it? Because it looks like you finished it and then you sanded it to get your flats. Is that why?
No, that's an interesting question. This is a unique. These two are unique features that I tried something different. You know, if you're not trying something different, you're really stale and you get old. So you're always wanting to express. What I did here in both cases, and this is aspen. I've got some really heavy resin pine that this process works better with. It doesn't work as well with the poplar or aspen. I spray on a shellac. I put a shellac clear finish on prior to coloring. And that's where you're getting a little bit of blotchiness in these whole thing. And what it does is, I just kind of like the crudeness of it. And I'm kind of going for the rustic element. I think it compares rustic to a little more, I wouldn't say refined, but just a little more controlled. And so I mean, you can even see where the shellac's dripped and see. But with the pine, you get more of this deep grain pattern color thing going on. It gives it a little more rusticness. But that's a good point. That's not what I'm real happy with. But these were all that I had to bring. I wanted to show an example of what happens when you put a shellac on underneath. I also do Watco Danish oil. I like to apply a Watco Danish oil to the raw surface. And it allows for that oil pastel to blend even thinner, easier. And it's just another experimental phase. Tyler's doing the same thing, going in any direction he can imagine. I mean, with the shellac, you know, this is nowhere in the country that's being done. He finds it in East India on toys that there's how they're doing that pigmented shellac, and he had to pioneer that whole process himself, and it really came out beautiful. You've seen the things he's done, and it gives it sort of a metallic, luminous quality. So with the splitting process, now that I've got that the whole thing completed to the degree that I like, I just take a butcher knife. This is my dad. My dad worked at the Dubuque Pack for about 12 years before he started his lumberyard, and these are some of his knives that he had while he was in the hog kill or whatever it was. But you just use it as a wedge to drive it through. You find your crease, your center, tap the top till you can't tap it anymore, and then just come down the sides. Now, if it doesn't pop within the first third, you should turn it around and start from the other end. But because you might be catching it somewhere and it might be tearing something out. You don't know what direction that grain is going. And so if it hasn't popped by this point, I'll just turn it over. And Tyler, if I miss catching that. There. And it just really simply comes apart. And you can see where half of that newspaper was left behind. And you can also see where I've got a ridge there, but they marry each other. There's a left and a right. So, oops. And so now I've got two pieces. I've got two wall racks. I just need another board for each one. And I also need the finials and the plates, and that's what I'll show you next. When I make the finials, I just start with a 12-inch piece, a 12-inch stock, and I mark the 6-inch point. and I turn them that way. If you're not having to deal with the end, you can. When I finish, then
Try to make those match the top and the bottom, or do you?
well,
Whatever.
no, they will because I'm using. See now, I'll split this in half, and this will be for the top and bottom, and it'll be the exactly same. But it won't be the same for the next one. This one, this is how. So, it's a very tedious process. If you want to try to put paper in between a small item like that, there's very good likelihood that that's probably going to come apart just because there's not enough surface for that to be glued together. So these were all together at one point. I colored them. I bandsawed that section out of the middle. I hand colored the top. And then I hung them from a screw with a wire and I lacquered it. And once it's been finished lacquered, I just simply hand eyeballed that through the bandsaw to get two pieces. Rather than, because it's so small, you can eyeball a straight line if you keep yourself held carefully. You can bandsaw that pretty precisely. And even if it's off a little bit, nobody's going to see it when it's flat on the board. It really is irrelevant if it's precise or not. It doesn't have to be a mere flat finish. In fact, I took these and I just hit them slightly on the horizontal sander just to kind of flatten them out a little bit.
What was the reason you said you don't do the split turning on those just because of the size of them?
They're too small. And the tediousness of having to glue them up. This way I don't have to glue anything up. I'm just taking the blank, the 4.5 by 4.5, turning it, leaving that space in the center where I know they're going to be cut apart. And I know I can hand saw that by eye through the bandsaw and get a close enough proximity to what I need. So this is, we have a large stock of cherry. We take those curvy cherry logs and we plane saw them. We don't square cut them, we plane saw them. So even if it's curved, we can get a 3-foot sections that's straight and save a lot of wood. So, and we don't kiln dry. This has been air dried for 2-3 years, probably about 12% moisture content. I pre-drill a hole in the top and the bottom. I plug it with one of those mushroom plugs. What I do is I take 2 plugs. I take 2 of those sheetrock plugging devices, and then I add 2 screws. At least this is what I'm going to do. And I put them in a little baggie and I tack it to the back for the customer to hang on their wall. I'd like to show you how this goes together then. I'll move this away. If you can all see this. You know, determining what's top and what's the bottom, it's anybody's guess, but you know, something like that would probably be my choice because of a thinner top. I place it as close to the center. I would measure it out first. I didn't measure any of this out. I'm going to eyeball it. I glue it. I put a sufficient amount of glue on these 2 parts, and then a straight line down the middle. I just take and I cut circles out of cherry, and then I bandsaw that in half. I just draw a straight line through the center point, cut it with a bandsaw, and then these become the transition plates that allow me to take that finial that I cut in half, and these get brad nailed in the base, glued, And then these guys get glued on the ends and the backs, and then they're applied thusly. And then you can see how that provides you the space to add the hooks. Now this could easily be held horizontally, and it doesn't have to be symmetrical. It just would mean that you would have to cut less away from your corner so that the very front of that has got the major mass to allow you to attach something to. It's the more traditional, and people have requested it, but we've always been not typically traditional. We've liked to go in other directions. And then at the last thing I do, I pre-drill in the back and I throw in 2 screws, just to give it the reassurance that it's not going to pull away. About 1 5/8" screw in these 2 sections, and that's going to be sufficient.
Do you have to put any pressure on that?
No, not really. Just the brads. The brad will by hand, the hand pressure in the brad, and then finally the screw. Certainly going to be sufficient. I try to avoid turning them up until that glue is set, because if the glue has got a crease or somewhere to flow out, then you're going to have to clean up the mess. But try to leave them horizontal for the rest of the day. And then I typically will do about 12 of the smaller sizes and maybe 5 or 6 of the bigger sizes, which means that I get 24 of the smaller ones and 10 or 12 of the bigger ones as a batch. You want to do things in batches. It really expedites the whole production when you can, do the same process over and over rather than doing one at a time and redoing all those processes. Trees, I do 6 or 8 at a time. It takes me about 2 weeks to make 8 coat trees. And I wanted to pass this around. Oh, this is another shot. This is a Green Bay Packer fan grimacing and trying to keep control. And he's got his Green Bay Packer shirt on tonight. And this is the shop that I bought for $9,000. It was the bottling works across from the Potosi Brewery. I bought it in 1995. It's 25,000 square feet of space. That's where our shop is now, our showroom. It's taken me 30 years to get it all functioning, but this is the altar that I did. We did a book on my altar in Dickeyville, Wisconsin. A friend of mine. This is my last altar that I'm going to do. It was a 30-foot tall altar. I brought my carving skills to work on it. I had to do the hand of God. I haven't painted in 35 years. I had to do the painting. I'll pass that around and you can check it out if you'd care to check that out. But now I really have fun just doing the whole coloring element. Tyler and I are doing shows together. He's doing about 25. I might do 10. But we have a Gary and Tyler David Woodworks operation, and it's really been fulfilling and very satisfying. Thanks very much. I really appreciate any questions.
Are you using the same coloring on yours now that Tyler's using?
No, he started out doing what I'm doing now. He's still doing the oil pastels for different processes like candle holders, but he's pioneered an entirely new and exciting method for coloring with the shellac, and I see a lot of he took 183 pepper mills to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to the art fair. He sold 180 of them, so he brought 3 of them back home. So it's really been a great vein that he's tapped into there for an exciting future.
Is he sharing that with you?
I've seen it. I see the work that he goes through to make his own pigment, and
I mean, is he sharing any of his money with you?
We know exactly who gets what, who's made what. I pay him a commission if he sells mine, and he pays me a commission if I sell his.
So this is your retirement fund?
what else is an artist going to do? If you didn't have children to lean on as artists, you know, it's not that you don't go into this business to be a Zuckerberg or an Elon Musk. You're doing it because you love it, and it sustains you and it gives you purpose. And so I have some. I'm also vice president. When I bought the bottling building, I bought the Potosi Brewery. I paid $6,300 for that. Me and my best friend Rick Tobin. We've got $8 million in that so far. It was turned into a nonprofit organization. We're getting about 70,000 visitors a year. We have the National Beer Museum there. It's Forbes magazine declared it the best beer museum in the world. It's completely reinvented that little bitty town of 683 people. We've got a production facility that we were bequeathed by a very wealthy person to have $22 million in that. So we also, I know we're in Iowa, but we just got the rights to do the Bucky Badger on our beer cans. And we're in all of the men's and women's sporting events in Madison. Talk about a huge coup, and that's because of the fact that we're a nonprofit. I'm an elected volunteer vice president, so I don't get a nickel for any of the works that we do. We have 18 board members, and it's all been about giving money to history and educational-based charities. So I have some free passes. If anybody has any interest in checking out our museum, I have some free passes. You're welcome to help yourself. Plus, they'll give you a free beer. If you want to check out Potosi at any time, you're welcome to help yourself. I'll leave these up here for any of those that want to.
When did you say you bought a brewery with?
I bought the burned out bottling works in 1995. 2 years later, Rick Tobin and I bought the brewery in 1997 for $6,300. And 2 years after that, we made it into a nonprofit. The whole community rallied behind us and said, just tell us what you want us to do. And so we made it into a nonprofit. That gave us the ability to get federal and state grants. And that's how we got about $8 million.
I know it was that had to have been after you guys got it, but you're talking about where the little they got the restaurant, and then they've got the part where you can look up to the brewery.
Yeah, there's 17,000 feet there. We had 40,000 feet altogether when we started. We could not save the rest of it. There was only 17,000 that was savable. The roofs were gone. The reason nobody wanted to touch it was because there was $500,000 worth of asbestos that had to be taken out. We got rid of it for about $100,000. We went into it knowing that there were other ways to get rid of that asbestos that didn't cost that much too, and they were clandestine ways. We ended up not having to do it. A brownfield grant came in and took care of all the asbestos, and that's when Herb Page and from the Quad Cities and Merle Vasson came on board with the ABA, and Steve Zeidema from Front Street Brewery. He's responsible for about half of our beers, half of our recipes. Owned Front Street Brewery. He came on and set up our brewery for us. So we're very indebted to the Quad Cities area. It's been, I mean, it's really amazing how quickly you can get there up through Dubuque and then into Potosi. It's about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. But it's been a total reinvention of that small town. And
My favorite was the Cave.
Cave Ale, yep.
The beer, the Cave.
Yes, sir.
Do you offer classes up there?
There is the ABA gives tours of the museum. We were advocating for hops as an alternative crop. We were doing classes on how to set up hops growing on a small acreage. But the beer making, we've got a whole $1 million brewery up in our historic building that we've abandoned completely because of its inefficiency. And we've gone to a $22 million production facility that's got 65,000 square feet of space. That $1 million system that we've abandoned is in perfectly good condition. I've always wanted the Madison home brewers or somebody to utilize that whole system. It's a computerized system. If anybody had any knowledge of brewing, what an opportunity that would be. But we don't offer any kind of classes for that other than, doing the tours of the history of beer making and
I think it's for the wood turning.
yeah. Oh, wood turning. I don't do it in my shop. No, we had an apprentice that we were using, keeping occupied for a while. Then Tyler left and he graduated, and so no, I've not gotten into that area. Yes, sir.
What kind of wood do you use for your spindles?
I love white oak. I love walnut. Those are two of my favorite. Then of course cherry. Oh, these are aspen. This is aspen. These are all that white wood. We love the white woods. We like that. We like the luminous background so that the color will stand out. We do it on cherry and walnut, but it's much more muted, and that's a beautiful tone too. But you really get the vibrant colors popping when you use those white woods. A pine, basswood. We use a lot of basswood, and then the aspen or poplar is the most popular stuff that we. Got a great organization, guys. I really am proud that you've been able to acquire or will be able to acquire this building. I think there's a great future. Wood turning is just one of the greatest satisfactions for anybody, either retired or just as a sideline. And don't underestimate what it's able to do from a professional standpoint either. And Tyler's a good example of that. I'll leave these up here if anybody cares to join me. I'm open. I work a half a day, I tell everybody, from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. Marlene lets me work on Saturday and Sunday till 6. So it's hard not to find me in my shop. And if you're ever there, my door is always open. And I'd be happy to show you what I'm working on or give you an update on what things are new. Thank you.